RWBY is a show that I don't think needs any introduction. If you were an anime fan at the late 2000s to any time in the 2010s, you definitely heard about this show or was watching it religiously like I was. RWBY is definitely one of those shows that shaped who I was, and I'm an old head because that show came out 10 plus years ago, and I feel like I should have one foot in the grave already. But like I said before, it was a show that was massively popular, and it still holds a pretty strong fan base today, despite all the bullshit that's happened with the IP. Viz Media has it now, we're getting a season 10, so you know what, that's good. But I do have a very strong fondness for the show and very good memories. So when I got told that there was a RWBY anime that existed, I was excited because obviously there was always contentions on whether RWBY considered an anime. I still think to this day you could definitely call it that. It's definitely anime inspired, but now there is actually a definitive RWBY anime that exists, which I think is actually pretty cool. So I decided to go ahead and watch it, and yeah, it's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. That's the best way that I could explain it. Okay, I do feel like I am being a bit harsh on the show, so let me go ahead and explain myself. I do think that the RWBY anime actually is a pretty decent anime in a vacuum. If you were someone that didn't know at all about the RWBY IP and all the content that came out with it, any of the characters and any of the lore and any of the stuff like that, it would actually be a half decent anime, and I could see a lot of people actually latching on to Ice Queendom. That's why I want to sit here and preface that as an anime in a vacuum, it's actually fairly decent. It does seem very competent. It does seem like, at least in terms of telling a story, it knows what it's doing. Again, if you didn't know anything about the IP, you could latch onto this and have a good time with it. But when we turn the conversation into more of the direction of, is it a good adaptation of the RWBY property? No, I would think it's not. Now, don't get me wrong, it does do some things pretty well. Remember, though, that this is a separate story or a story on its own, so it's not going to be completely accurate, but it does take some inspirations, or rather a lot of inspiration from season 1 stuff, like the introduction of all the girls being part of the team and the first episode kind of being a one-to-one representation of how the first episode for original RWBY went. And when it comes to all that accuracy, it's actually fairly well. The story beats are kind of the same, and when it splits off into its own stories, it's actually entertaining. It does keep some of the lore attached as well, but there's also some things that I feel like it adds. Again, I haven't watched RWBY in a minute, but I remember sitting there and being like, I don't think that's fairly accurate, but it still aligns with how the world interacts with Remnant and all that, so I can forgive it to an extent. But if you are a fan of RWBY and you've watched the show for any long time, again, I was a big fan and I watched it all the way up to season 5, and I do plan on watching the rest, maybe even making a little video on it. But if you've watched anything from RWBY, especially if you've watched just season 1, you would understand that the anime and the original IP are very different tonally. And I think my biggest issue when it comes to the RWBY anime is the fact that all the signature characters that we know and love are very vapid and devoid from the original show. Just talking about RWBY season 1, because this is what the anime pulls from a lot, there is a ton of characters that you can just fall in love with. All of them feel different, all of them have their own personalities, they feel quirky, they feel all over the place, but that is part of what makes RWBY so addicting and so lovable, is that they built these characters to just be so different from each other. When I tell you who RWBY, who Blake, who Whis, who Yang is, you know immediately who they are, what they look like, what their personality is, and how they clash with the various people in the series. And that also doesn't go for just our main characters. Look at Team Juniper. Nora is this psycho chick who is also bubbly at the same time. Pyra is this stoic woman who is the talk of the town and one of the best Remnant users. Jean, even though he can be a bit clumsy and a bit just, well, unreliable, he works his ass off. And Ren is he's just cool. Ren's cool. I mean, there's more to Ren, but I just like Ren, just because he's a coolio guy. Even characters that still have a little bit of their personality, like Ruby and Whis, are so vapid and devoid of what they used to be that, yeah, because I watched the IP, I recognize those characters and the energy they have, but if you're just an anime fan, you don't understand how special they are. If you've never watched RWBY, you don't get the charm behind Whis and Ruby. They stand out from the rest of the cast, sure, but that's because the rest of the cast is basically neutered. I think the one person that actually got it the worst out of anybody of the main cast and our side characters that are very well important is Nora. She's not only just devoid and vapid, she's a completely different person. She used to be the spunky, chaotic character that just would do her own thing and didn't give a hell's rat's ass who asked her stuff, but she still cared about her friends and would still be there. And yes, some of that is there, but the energy that Nora brought to the show is no longer there. It's like they just completely removed it for no reason. Now I get it. When you're trying to make an adaptation of stuff like that, you might be trying to get a new audience and you're trying to bring in more people in order to get more eyes on it. I can understand why someone would make the choices that they make for an adaptation like this. But I think a big charm of why people like RWBY is the amazing characters and the story. And I don't mind the story overall. And I think if you talk to a lot of RWBY fans, a lot of them are going to tell you that their favorite part are the characters. The fact that Blake has this dark and brooding history, or that Whis has this whole interaction with her family, how Yang and Ruby are these old sisters, and everybody else in between, how the headmaster is hiding something along with Pyra. A lot of those characters add so much to it because of their personalities. Yeah, they still have their backstories and stuff like that, but the way that they act in those situations carries the show tenfold. And especially nowadays when there's so much anime that comes out, you need to stand out. You need anything to help you like make a wave and pop. I mean, just look at summer of 2025. We have so much anime that are coming out, it's hard to keep track of all of it. There are so many sequels that are coming back in full drove, but there are also new shows that are breaking ground and making waves. And if you're going to want to compete in a market that has almost 20 to 30 anime coming out every season and over 100 anime coming out every year, you can't just be a generic anime. You gotta stand out. And I think the RWBY anime kind of misses the point in both being the adaptation to try to bring in new fans while also trying to stand out from the crowd. If I could say one thing that the RWBY adaptation does well, two things if I'm going to be honest. One is the animation. The animation is pretty good, and I'm sorry, I want to be that guy and defend the earlier season animation, but man, compared to what the anime does, it's just 10 times better. And that's not saying much for many people. That's such a nothing burger comment, but I know some people said that they didn't like the animation for the RWBY anime, and I just don't understand that. I mean, this whole year has been me just apparently defending bad animation, so maybe there's just one more for me to add in the crowd. But honestly, I think the RWBY anime, when it comes to its animation, is fine. It's good at times as well. But honestly, the second thing that this does well is that it just makes me want to go watch the original. I know I have 4 more seasons of RWBY that I consume, with a 5th on the way. And honestly, it's been so long, I might just go ahead and just start the whole thing all over again and just go through the girl's journey and all the characters and fall in love with them again. I would like to recommend this to RWBY fans, but as a RWBY fan, no, it's not a good adaptation. And honestly, in terms of getting new fans in, I don't think it does the job. As a general anime, sure, but when it comes to being an adaptation, it completely misses the mark.
I'm like so gay.